Oh, and you don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Hi, everybody. It's me, the Fetch, host of Inside the Eye Live. Before the Sunday mainstream media political pundit talk shows, there's Inside the Eye Live, where we break down some of the weekly mainstream media talking points before the talking points even get aired. Add in some entertaining stories, weather, cats, intriguing and informative guests, and you get one of the most listened to Saturday morning streaming media political talk shows going today. And it's all right here on our flagship station, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. So join me, the Fetch, for Inside the Eye Live every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern. It is truly intelligent media for the politically aware.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Welcome to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I'm your host, Janet Kira Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lessin. And today we have a very special guest, Peter Moon. And Peter is an author and publisher who founded Sky Books, a publishing house whose theme is Where Science Fiction Meets Reality. Peter's career as a writer began when he collaborated with Preston-Nichols to write the Montauk-project, Experiments in Time, which tells the story of secret experiments that occurred on Long Island's East End at Montauk, New York, where the human potential was explored and exploited to the point where time could be manipulated. The publication of this story led to further adventures and publications which caught the attention of Dr. David Anderson, a time-control scientist on Long Island who has demonstrated that time can be controlled and has also provided the math and physics to back up his claims. David brought Peter to Romania in 2008, where he visited the Romanian Sphinx and has investigated other remarkable events surrounding the prospect of time travel, which are included in the Transylvania series, a series of 5 books which are centered around the theme of ancient initiations, which took place thousands of years ago and upon which our modern religions are based. This includes the discovery and opening of a holographic chamber beneath the Romanian Sphinx and a time portal in the most sacred part of Transylvania. These are some of my favorite subjects. I love time travel. Peter recently has released a podcast interview with time control scientist Dr. David Anderson, which is the first public interview he has conducted in 5 years, and I have a link to that I will put into for Sean to put into the chat. And he has a new book, The White Bat. We're going to be talking about all of his work and all of his books. And Dr. Lessin, what would you like to say before we bring on Peter?
Well, it's really interesting, Peter, how your work dovetails with a lot of other stuff that we've been coming into. We had just been studying the Anunnaki, who were relative newcomers about 450,000 years ago, and we find that the tunnels that you've been accessing and that people have been finding all over, and the deeper stuff underneath Stonehenge and so forth, are all pointing to the ancient global civilizations connected to the very tunnels and the wonderful devices that you found there. So I really want to hear more about that. And, of course, it goes beyond time travel it's time altering and the different kind of directions in which our realities can go. So I'm really excited to hear what you got to say today, especially about Anderson too.
Okay, well, it's nice to talk to both of you again.
Yes, it's been a while. I think it's over a year. I forgot the last time we had you on, but we always enjoy having you here. And I know it's late for you in the East Coast, and it's only 2 o'clock here in Hawaii. But I want to put the ball in your court, and please tell us, because you have such a wide range of things that you study and report on and investigate and discoveries. Tell us what's the hottest thing, what's alive for you, what's the greatest charge, what do you have the greatest charge on right now?
Well, the most exciting thing that has happened in recent times was when, actually I had heard from David Anderson on my birthday in January. David Anderson, of course, is a time travel scientist, as you said, a very mysterious character who kind of weaves his way in and out of my life. First meeting him here on Long Island when he lived on Long Island. And I know when I did have occasion once to visit him in his home, which was at Kings Park, Long Island, he said I was only the second person really to be there. So he was very private, very guarded in what he talked about. And at that meeting, he asked me for some specific help. He thought he might disappear. He was going to Moscow right after 9/11. He was being sent to Moscow because when you're in the service, which he was, you're always obligated if the government calls on you to, go do their bidding. So
you can never quit.
Exactly. So he was sent to, they said, don't bring anything but your passport and your ticket or you won't be able to keep it. He went to Moscow and that's all he could tell me. And
wow.
Now he speaks Russian, by the way, and that's something he doesn't really brag about. He says that he doesn't speak Russian that well, but he does speak it very serviceably, if not well. Just like he speaks Romanian very serviceably, if not well. He's very good with languages. He can even he even gave a talk once in Chinese, although he's not fluid in the language. But in any case, I was able to calculate that he went from Moscow to Pakistan, and he was doing something over in Pakistan. I don't know. The only reason I know that is because he sent an email, and the reason he wanted to meet with me, it was 2 things, actually, he wanted to meet with me about. And probably, maybe he wanted to meet with me about having an event on time travel where we would have all these people from the East Coast, major physics people, and it would be a whole conference on time travel. And he was going to sponsor it, and he wanted myself and Preston-Nichols to participate. And he then had this issue about, he says, I don't know if I'm going to come back. They said I'll be gone 2 weeks, and if I don't come back in 2 weeks, I want you to make a lot of noise. So,
wow,
he did not come back in 2 weeks. And then after 3 weeks, I got a phone call from the only other person who had been in that apartment. and this caused me to talk a lot on the phone. And within 48 hours, we got an email to him and this other person and a third person, actually, who was his friend at the gym where he used to work out on Long Island, who used to run the gym. And he let us all know in one email that he was okay. And I was able to have that email traced to Pakistan, which was where the United States was trying to put the screws on the Taliban at that time, right after 9/11. And this was after we, as a country, had invaded Iraq. There was an invasion of Iraq, and then they were putting the screws on the Taliban as well. And so anyway, David began to, he came back. He didn't come back until about 6 weeks later. He called me up and said, thank you for doing all you did. And that was really about, I didn't hear from him too much anymore after that. He had security issues at the Time Travel Research Center, which was in Hauppauge, Long Island, in an industrial park. And he had developed it quite a bit. Just before all this 9/11 stuff had happened, there was one of his Romanian friends, who's also my friend now, was on his way. He was going to see the Time Travel Research Center. He came to the United States, but because of the 9/11, they wouldn't let any foreign nationals into it. That was a security issue because this man was a Romanian citizen and highly placed in the government there. So that was disappointing to this individual. And anyway, David, the Discovery Channel had also done a documentary. It was done at the behest. I mean, it wasn't necessarily the Discovery Channel. These networks will hire a production company to do something, and there was this whole documentary on the Time Travel Research Center, on the lab there in Long Island and also in New Mexico. And this has never seen the surface of light. And he does not know exactly what happened to it, except it was shelved. Instead, you have popular science touting the work of Ronald Mallett, Connecticut PhD. I believe it's the University of Connecticut, and Spike Lee buys his novel about time travel. And this poor man is not really in the same ballpark. And in other words, somebody once told me, a Native American woman, she says, the media and people, they seek out mediocrity. Mediocrity becomes the order of the day. Television will seek out mediocrity. And
so it was a false flag to distract from the real things that David was saying.
Well, yes, but also there is a predisposition in people to seek out mediocrity and to negate the good. Just like with Tesla, was ignored for decades, ignored. First he was blackballed, but then look at, I didn't even hear about Tesla in school. Did you, when you were going to school?
Oh, no, resurrect him.
Well, yeah, and so I only learned about Tesla when I started, I didn't learn about it from Preston-Nichols, but when I started hanging out with people that, were raising a lot of these issues that cavorted with him and whatnot. And because I'd never heard of Tesla. And of course, now everybody's heard of Tesla. But, yes, in other words, people seek out mediocrity in religion. They seek it out in entertainment. they don't realize to what degree they seek out mediocrity. But
it's so true. I thought about it now, but everything gets banalized.
Well, yes, and you know this well because of your studies and Part X. They also seek out mediocrity in partners and in their sexuality. And sometimes it's worse than mediocrity when you get into the more perverse side of sexuality. It's worse than mediocrity. But so anyway.
It's degenerate, like Frederick the Great, and the Great what,
So anyway, but back to David Anderson, who is not mediocre at all and has a tendency to play down his own genius. So anyway, he disappeared for a long time, or was very low profile, and then he basically had to shut down the center in Long Island for security reasons. And he had the center now in, at that time he had one in New Mexico, which is still there, and also in Romania, which was a theoretical center where he was employing mathematicians. And so anyway, this was 2001, 2002, and it was about, if I recall properly, it's about 2003 when he called me. He had moved up to Rochester, and had taken a job at Bosch Industries. Bosch is a German company, and if you look at their diatribe, they will basically tell you that they were the only major defense contractor in Germany that was anti-Hitler. Well, I personally find that a little hard to swallow. However, they were a German contractor, and they make a lot of the things you might be familiar with, from snow blowers to appliances, and they make much, more big defense items as well. So anyway, he was working there, and it was all very low profile there. And he contacted me and said, I want to turn over the information that we have left from the Time Travel Research Center, most of it which was going to be dedicated towards a time travel museum he wanted to open up at Long Island. He says, I want to, give this to you, because I don't know who else better to give it to. So he says, you're going to need a station wagon or stuff, because there's a lot of stuff. So Preston-Nichols had a van, and he was living on Long Island at that time, and Preston helped me, and we drove up to Rochester, where he was, and could meet with him only for about 15 minutes. He says, I'm not going to be able to work with you for another 5 years. I'm not going to be able to see you for another 5 years. And I thought that was very disappointing. I hadn't seen much of him anyway. So I loaded all this stuff into Preston's van, and most of it was books. There was some artwork, and some of the original Journeys into Time, I was able to maintain that and resurrect it. That was his video that he had produced on time travel. Might even be on YouTube now. So anyway, that was 2003, and he remained, that was in Easter weekend of 2003. So then we went to, in the meantime, in August of 2013 was this great discovery in Romania, underneath the Romanian Sphinx, which the story you're familiar with, where they discovered this holographic chamber. Now, it wasn't much longer after that, was within a year. My book, The Montauk-Project, had been published in the Romanian language, and the Radu Cinemar, the author of the book Transylvania Sunrise, had seen the Montauk-Project, wrote to the publisher and said, would you like to publish this manuscript? He did. He published it in Romanian. It was translated into English for me, sent to me, would you like to publish this? Sat on my desk for 4 years. And it wasn't until almost 5 years later that I had the opportunity to finish the manuscript. I started it, but I could never finish it. Not because it wasn't easy to read, but because I was busy with other projects. So then, when I decided that I wanted to publish it and negotiated a contract, which took several months with the publisher, David gets in touch with me and says, would you like to go to Romania? I said, sure. It was 5 years. It was 5 years to the month. 5 years to the month. And then he brought me over to Romania, and I've made 8 trips there. I'm going back in next summer. And I didn't go this year because I had other responsibilities. The first time I hadn't been in 8 years. And I missed.
Hey, Peter, he knew it was going to be 5 years because he already went there. He just came back to inform you of it.
Well, it's nice to think that. And I asked him about that when I got there. He says, he says, it just worked out that way. I'm really not always so accurate. He didn't take any credit for that. But maybe some part of him knew, because one of his friends in Romania, who's a very esoteric lady, very knowledgeable lady, and she told me that in her estimation, David understands about 10% of what he's involved in. Now, she's not necessarily, the be all and the end all, but she made that was her sort of psychic intuition. She says he's aware about 10% of all the things he's involved in, because he's not necessarily just operating on this timeline, just like the rest of us are not necessarily just operating on this timeline. So to what degree can we take ownership of our multiple roles in existence? But so anyway, David has been in and out of my life over vast periods of time. So I did have a bit of an association, a running association with him from 2008 when I visited Romania that first time, and he really couldn't come forth with anything that was of value except that he had reincorporated and was going back in the time travel business. When he was at Bosch, he was going to India. He was doing a lot of what's that technology where you can get identification by looking in somebody's eyeball or cornea? It's a bioidentification, biosensors. He was doing a lot of technology there, and we could find it on the internet where he was posted stuff, but it was very obscure, not much. And he was going back into the time travel business. And I also think he was working on security issues when he was at Bosch, because I think he needed increased security for what he was doing. So in any case, 2009, I returned to Romania, and he lectured on time travel pretty extensively, and he had me participate in the lectures. It was like tag team lecturing, and we would sort of pick each other up when one of us ran out of juice. We might get a little tired, and then we'd take over. And I'd take over or he'd take over. And, of course, he would talk about the science of it. And all of the stuff he was lecturing on is now on his website, andersoninstitute.com. And it's not necessarily easy to understand. It's not impossible to understand. But I have been able to, and because I was, tutored in some of the most important concepts, in addition to listening to it, not understanding it all, I went back earlier this March, and I began to study it relentlessly, and I increased my understanding of it in quantum leaps. And I was able to verify that what I had increased my understanding with him was correct. And we can talk about some of that, but I will just sort of carry on. Let me ask you a question before we carry on.
I just have this image when you say time travel business. It's like, okay, do we go to the store and choose that we want to time travel somewhere? I just have this image. What does he mean by time travel business?
Well, the Time Travel Research Center. The Time Travel Research Center was originally set up as a security company. Now, I don't really know what that means, but it was a security company. And what he originally made his claim to prominence was that he had patented certain algorithms which were necessary to maintaining satellites in space. And this was so, although he did not state this, the implication was that if they're using his technology to maintain the orbit of satellites in space, he must be getting some sort of royalty. And he also funded the Time Travel Research Center, when we're talking about business, with investors in the medical field, because at the time I met him, he could slow down time in a field the size of a soccer ball, slow it down or speed it up. And when he slowed down time, he could preserve an organ. So investors flocked to this, because if you could preserve an organ like a heart, a kidney, a liver, this is very valuable to the medical field. And you can imagine, you know what biotech is like, stocks like that. So they can just focus on one disease and they charge an arm and a leg for it. And so these are very, sometimes very profitable stocks to invest in. So David Anderson's investors, it was not a public stock offering. It was a private, this is how he raised money for the initial Time Travel Research Center, which was now parlaying into something called Anderson Multinational, which is like the parent corporation. And then there is the Anderson Institute. Now, I don't know if Anderson Multinational, what else it might or might not be involved. There was a website for it. I don't think it's up anymore. The Anderson Institute is still up. And all of this activity so this is some of the business, but there's also a hidden business, and that hidden business would have to do with time travel is one of the most important areas of defense for all the countries of the world. They view it as a defensive or offensive weapon. It is viewed as a weapon of defense or as a weapon of offense, because if you control time, we don't have to really think too hard about how powerful that is. If you can control time, you can control the stock market. You can bet on the right stocks. You can have wealth. You can predict what's going to happen on the battlefield. So,
well, you know what else you could do? You could maintain. You could just keep resetting the present, so we keep living with the same people on top who stay on top.
You could indeed. So this is of keen concern. However, it doesn't take a rocket science to understand that some of the people who rule our governments and whatnot are not necessarily playing a fair deck or a full deck. It could be a fair deck. In some cases, it's a full deck. And now this is an interesting story about him. When I was in his apartment on Long Island, and I was making a comment about a Christmas. We were talking about China, and I was making a season's greeting card I got from the Chinese once. When I was in Frankfurt for the book fair in 1992, I met these Chinese, and they were very interested in the Montauk-project and time travel. They were the only country that even showed any interest when I was over there. And I found that odd. Their interest was so piqued, whereas the other countries, were. There was one guy from India, and I was trying to interest him, and they had all these spiritual books. I said, "Do you have any UFOs over there in India?" And he goes, "Some, but not too many."
Not too many.
He was pretty funny, but the Chinese were very interested, and so I didn't hear from them. And then, 2 years later, I get a New Year's card from them. I thought, this is such odd. I haven't heard from these people, and that's all I ever did hear from them. I eventually did get the books published in Chinese, but I don't think it was from that company. It could have been from somebody who went. But anyway, I was commenting on this to him, and he says, "Oh, I've got a card from China." And he takes me over to his mantle over the fireplace, and it's from the president of China. And then he's got all these cards which are from heads of state, heads of state presidents, and all these Christmas cards or seasons cards. One was from Gaddafi. And, it's like, wow. And he told me that he often had occasion to meet with world leaders, and he either said or implied it had to do with his expertise in nuclear weapons, because he's expert in these, being a physicist and whatnot, and being trained in the military. But he said that these world leaders often are very befuddled at how they got in their position, and they don't really know how they ended up there. And he says they try very hard to do the right thing. They don't know that they're doing the right thing. And he said that many of them have a lot of conscience. They have a lot of conscience, and they feel that they're between, and this is not the words he used, but basically feel between they're in a rock and a hard place as regards doing the right thing. And he had a certain amount of sympathy, just as if you'd been sitting across the desk from them as their psychologist. You might have more sympathy for them than you might get from reading the newspapers and watching the news. So in any case, he was operating in an echelon of world politics that is just not typical or usual. And it's not something he was particularly proud of. It was just kind of matter of fact. He's showing me all his Christmas cards. and they must have been up there a year, because it was like we were in November, and so they were from the previous year. They'd been up there about a year. So in any case, he's a very interesting character, a very mysterious character. As one of his friends told me, he's got security clearance that's higher than the president, which really shouldn't surprise us, because we've all heard about it.
Right.
Really all heard about that sort of thing before. People, the president doesn't necessarily have the highest security clearance. So in any case, he and then in 2009, I saw him in 2009 in Romania when he did these lectures, which had a very, as they say, influence on me, which wasn't really able to come to fruition until a few months ago. And then he came to my house the following September. And this was a meeting to do a, sort of wrap up on the camp and whatnot, and talk about it and this. And I showed him some videos of the camp and he was very excited to see. I was also able to play him an audio CD that the author Radu Sinemar had sent to me. And he says, I only want you to listen to it, but the only other person I want you to hear it is David Anderson. He can hear it, and I would like to meet David Anderson. Now, so this time told me that he didn't know David Anderson. And whereas I thought they might have known each other, David kind of led me to believe that he did. And after he listened to it, he said he was very impressed that Radu trusted me so much. And he also said that he was told that he had met Radu by one of his associates in the government, but he couldn't say who it was. Somebody who he had trusted for a long time, and said, you did meet Radu. You didn't necessarily know it was him. I don't even know if that's accurate, if his friend told him what was accurate, because there's a lot of opinions about Radu that are not necessarily correct. I've heard so many opinions, and their opinions are so strong, and they have opinions about the chamber, and the opinions are too strong, because none of these strong opinionated people have been in the chamber. So, and it's just kind of, I don't know where the strength of the opinion comes from. But in any case, then the following.
Slow down. There's like different factions that have different interpretations they're trying to push. Is that? Do I have you so far?
Perhaps. I don't know. I don't know where strong opinions come from. I mean, Sasha, is your degree in psychology?
Yeah, one of them.
Yes. Okay. Well, let me ask you this as a psychologist. I have my own opinion. It's not necessarily a strong opinion. Where in the hell do strong opinions come from? What makes a strong opinion? Like, I'm
strong opinion. It's called consonance or dissonance. And so if you just nudge a little bit away, and then you have to suffer for it, the more you suffer for it, the more you cling to it. And if you're disproven, then you really cling to it even more. When prophecy fails, it's because you were so pure, and it's like it comes from this doubt that gets exaggerated, or it could go the other way. You either drop the thing and say it was junk, but it's called cognitive dissonance.
Well, and that's what forms a strong opinion.
Absolutely.
Well, and what you're saying is you're suffering for this opinion or whatnot. It might be that you heard something bad about a particular race of people or ethnicity, and it gets reinforced, and people keep, proving it to you.
Yeah, but at the political level, it sounds like the opinions you're getting are people that are representing perspectives that are mutually antagonistic for reasons that we don't know. That there's something way deeper going. You're on top of such important information. There's people that want it to manage how it gets out. That's what it seems to me.
Well, I what's interesting, the cognitive dissonance is relevant because, like, say, I've noticed with my work when there is I notice people's gray matter can reject it without even actually accessing or talking about it. or just a few words. They can turn and totally polarize because the vibration and frequency of what I'm talking about in my books sort of turns ordinary reality upside down.
I think that's so right on, because it really does, because they have to toe the line on evolution and stuff in their Bible, and have to deal with the academics that are can control their careers, and your stuff threatens them. You've got too much information.
Well, yes, and it's so when these strong opinions might have to do with the fact that the people advocating these strong opinions don't want it. They've already got their idea, and this information, even though they're sort of with the program, they don't want their idea unmocked or compromised, their idea of the universe. Because look at this chamber, holographic technology that can read out your DNA. This stuff is completely turns things upside down. And it's not something. So some of the opinions or information that's been fed to me is that it's not, the chamber is not in this reality. It's in another reality. Now, it's certainly a bridge to another reality. Other people might tell you that it is in this reality. Now, we do know that there is a structure and an infrastructure around this area where the base is. There are military personnel, and it's all very hidden and camouflaged, but there is evidence to point out that they got some big secret base going on. If you have a big secret base with, the military, well, what the hell are they doing if it's in another reality? So,
right.
What is it? And of course, there's no question that the whole information bridges to consciousness and other forms of reality. But so anyway, but back to David. In 2010, there was going to be an event at Montauk, a seminar that was going to feature myself and Artie Crippen, the Montauk medicine man, who was returning to Montauk for the first time in 30 years. And it was a very special event, if only to bring him back to Montauk. So he'd been an interesting player in my life. I wrote about him in my book, The Montauk Book of the Living. And he was he still is a wonderful friend. I just don't see him too much anymore. But we were doing this event. So in the midst of it, I had this dream about David Anderson. And then right after the dream, I get a phone call from him, and I was going to have a meeting with him in this hotel, and he says he emailed me and says, I would like to have a face-to-face meeting with you. And I'm thinking, like, what in the earth is this about? And I said, well, sure. I said, and he suggested a time. I said, I'm going to be out at Montauk that weekend. Would you, but you can come. You will be. You'll be a guest if you want to come. And he says, is that all right if I do a presentation? I said, well, certainly. So he came all the way down from Rochester, which he was at the time, and he went out to Montauk, and we had this very unusual but successful event at Montauk. It was a 3-day event. I guess we had just enough people signed up, because it's like, you might think that, people would jump for this event, but when anything has to do with Montauk, not necessarily. People, and I did not advertise that David Anderson was going to be there. I could have increased the attendance, but I did not want to advertise it for security reasons. Didn't want.
I got to say, Peter, that we've run into people that when you mention Montauk and what went on there, they get scared, they run away, they say, I don't want to hear it. They show evidence that they've been there in some sense. That people are afraid of Montauk sometimes.
It is true. And what I've discovered, and I don't want to digress too much here, but like Hollywood basically is the montauk-project. Hollywood itself. And, it's maybe it's a metaphorical Montauk, but it's all about these hidden messages and the control that is influencing the media. the media influences. Look at, they had this transmitter at Montauk, but it's easier and more effective to put this stuff into the movies, whether it's subliminal or non-subliminal. It's just, pasting people with it. And it's, so yes, and some of the messages that come out in movies are just so, counterproductive to life. But in any case, so we had this, I was going to say that the first night there's like, this wind. It's like there's only a handful of people that show up, and some are still coming in. They haven't arrived yet. Some would arrive that night, and it was just like, God, is this going to be an event or not? And then I told him, I said, well, I have a surprise for you. We're going to have David Anderson here tomorrow. So I was up at 5:00 in the morning. We were going out to watch the sunrise at Montauk. Beautiful sunrise, and that began the day for me. It was a very long day, and towards the evening, it all peaked. All these people gathering from all over, and I also invited some of the local people who had a part to play, including the owner of the motel. And so we had about 20 people in this room in the hotel, and this special room, I guess you could do events in. And David showed this, he gave a talk, and he showed this video of an amaryllis plant growing in 3 minutes and when it would normally take 3 or 4 days. And I had a photographer there who said, that's not time-lapse photography. It wouldn't work like this. Of course, nobody really thought it was time-lapse photography. He said he would not allow me to video it. He said he does not have permission. This is the first time he'd ever shown it to a public group. Now, this was an early generation of the time reactor. He could slow down time or speed it up. And that was 2010. And at the same time, he had announced on the radio that he had progressed where he could actually put humans in a self-contained field. Now, the next morning, I took him out to breakfast, and I remember, the first thing I asked him, I said, well, what was this meeting you wanted to have? He says, I just wanted to ask you what you wanted to do at Atlanticron, the summer camp in Romania this year. What do you want to do? What do you think is a good idea? So that began a film project. I said, well, I want to do a film project. And, that's great. So there was a film project done that summer, but he did not go. And he has not returned to the summer camp since. And that was the last time I saw him in person in 2010. Now, there had been conversations, and when I was doing the film project in Romania, now I was I wrote a script for the kids because the year before they were stopped from making a film, and I said, this is bad. I was helping them, and somebody got kind of personal. So not with me, but with the cinematographer, and I said, this isn't right. We're trying to make a film. So I said, we'll do it right this year. So David was helping from a distance. He provided some equipment, a computer and whatnot, and I was writing to him every day. So when I would go, and then I went to Bulgaria after the film, where I was touring all these sacred sites. And he said, including the Temple of Bubastis, which is in Bulgaria, and right near the border in Turkey. And he said he was monitoring my progress in Bulgaria as well, because he had been there and he was just concerned about my safety. So I was writing back and forth to him. Usually when I would go to Romania is when I would have communication with him, and it would be by internet. So, and then occasionally we'd have these meetings with the World Genesis Foundation, the board members, and he would, participate, but it was always very sort of official, maybe very superficial in terms of talk. So I never really was able to talk to him substantially. I would always send him my books and newsletters, which he would look at. And then this last January, he wrote to me on my birthday, and I wrote back to him and said, hey, I'm doing these podcasts. I'm now doing podcasts on my website, digitalmontauk.com. I said, would you like to do a podcast? And he wrote me back like months later and says, gee, I didn't see that. Oh, yes, I want to do a podcast with you. I'd be happy to do a podcast with you. So it took, he says, we'll do this in May. And I when I have a connect, because he was in India and he didn't have a good connection. So it took until May to start organizing it. And then, he didn't have a microphone and it didn't work. So we had several conversations in May. We were private, and I was very surprised when we actually got around to do the podcast in June that he actually came forward with some of the things that he said were private. So when you say what's interesting lately, he has been the most interesting thing in my work lately, and this goes back to June.
So what did he reveal?
All right. I'm just looking at the top of it's not top of the hour. We've got a good 10 minutes. Okay. So what did he reveal? Well, I encourage everybody to listen to podcast number 8 at digitalmontauk.com. And if you're not familiar with Dr. David Anderson, you can go to podcast number 7 where I explain it. Well, the first thing I had asked him privately and clarified this on the podcast was that by studying his work on the website, andersoninstitute.com, it became apparent to me that when you're slowing down time, you're actually going into the future. When you speed it up, you're going into the past. So at the rate which you slow it down or speed it up would determine how far you're going to go into the future or the past. So, and he basically said, yes, this is true. Now,
wow.
And now,
would you go over that again and slowly? That's a lot to take.
Well, it's a lot to take, but see how simple it is. It makes time much more, I guess, tangible, or time travel. If you want to speed time up, you're going to go into the past. You're going to go the faster you speed time up in, say, a closed field, like called a soliton field or a time bubble. The faster you speed it up, it's actually going to curve off from the direction you're going in. If you have a vector going forward, like on an XY graph, and it's going to curve off the timeline you're on. It's going to appear invisible. And the math and physics of this, which I know you can understand, is in this newsletter that you can download if you go to Mathematics of Time at digitalmontauk.com. I've got a PDF file of one of my newsletters. It's a recent newsletter, the most recent newsletter, which explains the math and physics of how simple that backs up time travel. And this is something he's been spouting off for a long time. And because I studied his information so attentively, he looked at it, and I said, would you please look at this and tell me what you think? And this is what we had some of the conversations in May. He says, wow. He says, nobody's ever had the patience to break it down in such simple language. He says, can I use this when I give my lectures at universities? She gives many lectures at universities. And I said, well, certainly. So I put him on the copyright as well, because it's basically his information that I've learned from him that I've broken down into more simple concepts. And the basic thing, I give an explanation of what a closed time-like curve is. And a closed time-like curve is basically, and I explain what a light cone is. Now, he lectured on light cones and closed time-like curves in Romania. But these concepts are a little daunting because I couldn't say, well, how can you, what the hell is this? He says, well, basically, I broke this down, that every single point in space, it's like a pixel, has a light cone. Now, this is theoretical, and this is theoretical physics. It doesn't come from David Anderson. But if you look up a light cone on Wikipedia, which is basically straight physics, it's going to could confuse the hell out of you, because they put all this stuff in you don't need to understand. And then if you don't have familiarity with it, you're going to be lost. And the tragedy of all this with physics is that they don't really understand how time travel works. You see a lot of speculation about it and a lot of theorizing. Well, I'm friends with a man who actually doesn't. And I was still friends with Preston-Nichols, who actually did it. Maybe he does it too, but it's a different approach. In any case, every point in space is like a pixel, and each one is a light cone. Now, it's called a cone because you imagine a 45-degree angle going out. in either direction. Now, the reason is light can't go more than 45 degrees. And the reason for this is it's just theoretical. If you put flash a light, and you're on a spaceship going at the speed of light, and you flash a light at a mirror, by the time it reaches that mirror, the flashlight and the mirror are now going to be, millions of miles away from where they were. So where it emanated from, which is representative of the speed of light, where you are when it hits that mirror is going to be so far down, but you're going to have to draw a line from where it started to where that mirror ends up. And that angle is going to be 45 degrees. And it's going to conform to the Pythagorean theorem. This is all explained in the PDF file at digitalmontauk.com in the mathematics of time. It's got to be a 45-degree angle. And that's why it's called a light cone, because light's not going to exceed 45 degrees. It's just not going to do it.
The angularity is what slows it down.
Well, but listen. So it can go in either direction. But when see, according to physics, and this is from Frank Tipler, who in 1972 demonstrated on paper that if you exerted enough gravity on a point, that it could actually bend space-time. It could actually bend it. Now, this is accepted in physics. So,
yes.
And of course, gravity is a force. Gravity is a force. Now, it's a tremendous amount of gravity, and there'd have to be all sorts of things done that you just can't do pragmatically. But all you need to be able to do, theoretically, is bend this light cone. Now, Ronald Mallet thinks that if you bend a light cone and you can bend it, it's always going to bend around on itself, and you keep bending it and bending it and bending it, and it's going to come back. But he says you're not going to go into any point in the past before where that light cone originated. So his thesis is that you can't go back in time. You can go forward, but you can't go backward, and you can't go back before your time machine was invented. Now, what Dr. Mallet does not understand is that, yes, if you can not only bend the light cone, but you can bend the platform on which the light cone is residing. You can bend that which is bending. And you can bend it around, and you can go all the way back into the beginning of history. And I'll explain this thing clearly, and in the newsletter, which I encourage people to read. And so basically, when I'm understanding the theory of this, keep in mind, David is way past this theory. He was talking about this years ago and was talking to me about how difficult it was to go to a university and to talk to people, and people just don't register. And he says, finally, some kid, some student would get it. And then it would the 100th monkey effect would start to take over with everybody. But it would not come from the professors. It would come from the younger students who didn't have a tunnel vision or a prejudiced mind. Now, I've seen an MIT professor talk about light cones and time-like curves. He's mentioned them on a video on YouTube, and I swear that he's a very smart man, but he does not explain what they are, and he's talking all about movies, time travel movies. I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, what is like? And he does mention the 45-degree angle, but he doesn't explain it. So like he's aware of it. So in other words, there's not a functional doing. And he's talking all about quantum this and quantum that. And you don't need to put quantum physics into what I'm talking about here. Quantum physics, of course, is a very sexy term, and it includes the potential to be or do anything. But we don't need that in this particular paradigm. And by the way, David does not say this is the only way to time travel. There are other methods but this is the most practical and efficient way that he has found. So basically, he's actually doing this stuff. He's been doing it a long time. He led me to believe that I can visit his, this is interesting, and I will share this. He did lead me to believe that I could visit the lab in India. He said that he was saying is, boy, you could have some really interesting discussions with some of our technicians at the lab and in India. And he says, we'd have to go out to dinner. I'd like you to go out to dinner with them. Not at the lab. No, go out to the dinner. So, go out to dinner with them. And so then I asked him, and then we next spoke, I said, well, is it possible I can see the lab? You said to go out to dinner, but I'd rather see the lab, and, I can go out to dinner anytime. And he says, that could be arranged. That could be arranged. I said, is there a security issue? No, we could do that. Now, of course, the question is, when you're dealing with somebody like him, you'll be called when you're called. And Aleister Crowley said this about the secret chiefs. The secret chiefs are sort of like the big secret. Some people would think of them as the psychic mafia, but actually the secret chiefs are really nothing more but the 12 signs of the zodiac and the archetypes of those. And when they sort of come alive, he says, you don't seek out the secret chiefs. They let you know when they're ready to talk to you.
Radio at preston-nichols.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Tune in Tuesdays at 12 noon Eastern on Studio A to hear Tammy Adams share her knowledge of an unknown realm on Talking with Your Angels. Join Tammy as she uncovers hidden secrets about the spiritual world of angels, ghosts, and other entities that have been with us longer than we know. Tammy is a psychic, a teacher, spiritual coach, a leader in her field, and will be sharing her information and stories with you. So join us on Tuesdays at noon on Studio A. With Tammy's guidance, you'll find out who has been watching over you from the other side, and soon you will be talking with your angels.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Aloha, and welcome back to the Sacred Matrix of Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And I'm Janet Kira Lesson with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson, and we are interviewing Peter Moon. But before we get back to our show, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over to the donation button on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Revolution Radio is listener-supported, and we do rely on your donations. So please donate what you can, $1, $5, $15, $20, $100, whatever you can is greatly appreciated. And we do thank you very much for your donation. And Dr. Lesson, what would you like to say before we go back to the show with Peter?
Well, I think this is a really exciting discussion we're having about time travel and how it can work in both directions. And it's great the way you've simplified it. I hope people will peruse your website and just see, because this is really, people need to get this. They really do.
And I'm really curious. One of my friends is Andrew Bashago, and he talks about his time travel technologies that he's been exposed to. And you mentioned that there are other types of technologies. First of all, I wanted to ask you what you think about Andrew Bishaga's stories on time travel, and how do they correlate with David Anderson's? Welcome back to the show.
I've known Andrew for it must be about 13, maybe 15 years, and he had actually had the rights to a book about Fatima, the prophecies of Fatima. And one of my authors, Alexandra Bruce, who speaks Portuguese, had translated it from the Portuguese into the English. And that's how I got to know him. And I wasn't able to do the book for him to publish it. It just wasn't able to do it. But in any case, that's how I got to know him. And he used to talk to me about Project Pegasus. He's a very nice man. And it's very clear to me that he was part of some project that involved mind control and possibly time travel. But the problem with project people in general is that they're not able to correlate or integrate their experience in a grounded fashion. Therefore, some of the things he says, like in other words, do not invite credibility. And this is a problem that he has. And there's a point where the good judgment fails. And this was resulted in him going on the Stephen Colbert show and being made fun of and ridiculed. And of course, pardon me?
I'm just agreeing that everybody that's been involved with these projects, they have to be careful that they don't get involved in some kind of show that's just going to turn around and make fun of them.
Well, yes, but you see, there is and I had another Facebook friend who went on, he had abduction phenomena, and he went on to what he thought was supported radio, and then he got ridiculed, and it caused all sorts of emotional reactions in him, and he's just kind of gone silent. And of course, it's not necessarily a good thing to advertise one's dysfunction and to spray it all over the airwaves. And this is unfortunately how he is perceived by those with, I guess, what you'd call like exercising their rational minds. And this is unfortunate. And so therefore, when I choose to tackle the subject of time travel, I tend to steer away from those so-called experiencers. And the reason I embrace Preston-Nichols, who very much indeed is an experiencer, is because he had a lot to bring to the table in terms of bringing information out that actually was able to explain other information and correlate information. I've not found that I've been able to do that with other people's necessarily. Al Bielek being one, once he kind of ran out of, he could go into, I once listened to him to a talk for 2 hours, and in a lecture, I said, what on earth is he talking about? Well, by the time he got to the end of the lecture, I then saw what he was talking about. But then I couldn't even remember it a week later. So it's like, what value is the information to me? I'm valuing it selfishly. What the value it is to me? A lot of people like to listen to Andy. I'm not one of them. But I'm more interested in, I would feel that, that not necessarily what David's doing doesn't line up, because David is basically a scientist who's, not necessarily, he's patient and understanding with people, but he does not have time to deal with people like that because he's doing, I guess, what you call real work. Not that his work, not that people's experiences are not real, but he's doing in a grounded engineering fashion. And this is what appeals to me, because anybody, and I would also mention this about a lot of the abductees out there, I could make up better stories than they're talking about. I could make them up if I chose to. They'd be much more fascinating, and they would be much more integrating, but they would be made up. I could do that if I so chose and get a lot of attention doing it, but I choose not to because I'm more interested in integrating the foundational points of where we're going with. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah. What I was interested in is the different technologies that are mentioned, and if there's any validity in the different, like the chronovisor and these different technologies. I'm working very closely with the Edgar Mitchell Foundation with the experiencers because many people are starting to come out with their stories as they feel comfortable in doing so. So at this point, we're just gathering information as in some kind of in surveys, and we're going to be punching the numbers and seeing what is emerging, whether it's real or fabricated. At this point in time, we have such a society that's mind controlled. We don't know what's real and what is fabricated. So we're just looking at the correlations and throwing out. Well, we're just looking at the whole thing. We're not throwing out anything at this point. We're just looking at the whole phenomena. What do you want to say about that?
Perhaps it's a spurious dichotomy between internal and external. And a person's talking about the hero journey, however they symbol it, and different people symbol it different ways. And they're all valid. The elephant of reality has got different body parts that we grasp, and everybody's picture, I think, is fun to look at.
Right, yeah. So I understand that comes from a scientific approach. So, but I'm just looking at the whole phenomena because it's something that's emerging right now. There are millions of people that are now saying they'd had some experiences. There are hundreds of whistleblowers that are coming out. Many of them have had exposure to time travel programs. So I'm looking at what do you know? Well, you were involved with the Montauk story. Are there similar operations going on this planet and perhaps Mars and the Moon? And I wonder if you've researched
and
that.
does it involve pyramids? I've just been reading David Wilcox, and he's saying that time travel is facilitated by pyramidal structures. I wonder if that's any part of your reality, too.
Well, David Wilcox, I first, ran into him when he was touting the Montauk-project and was saying, he was using this as sort of his go ticket to attention. And he was saying very incorrect things about it. And of course, that book is all about the pyramid. It's about the octahedron in time travel. It's like, what is he saying? He just copies information. But of course, it's all part of that. But to get back to the question of are there similar projects? What Janet was asking. Yes, there's this whole universe is sort of a testament to these ideas of these projects and people being mind controlled, or where their gray matter is not fully functioning. And of course, we can go into some exotic theories about the 24th gene pair and fully activated brain with the 72 Goetia, or the 72 channels of the human brain that supposedly since King Solomon could, unleash. Every one of these represented the 72 gateways, or a jinn would control each one. And so therefore, when people don't have their gray matter operating with a full deck, it's like, what is there instead? What is there instead is something like a banal commercial or nursery rhyme. It's something that it's just like, it's crap. And so therefore, sometimes the average citizen can watch, people are so suggestible. And so like if you start running television and you start running TV, you start running, people will start, what is it? It's like this Be Like Mike thing they used to have, like Michael Jordan. Everybody wanted to be like Mike, It's like, so you have all these kids wanting to be like Mike. And
yeah, hypnosis.
Well, yes, yes, exactly. And I say, I love
programming. So there's so much of this out there on so many levels that it is shaping the whole reality. It's creating a whole new paradigm, a whole new timeline, a whole new existence. So what came first, the chicken or the egg? We have this emerging right now, and I'm just looking at it at a whole other level. Not doing the blame, shame, criticize or anything. It's what is happening to our matrix.
Did someone steal a timeline? A different timeline? Can we get our timeline back?
Well, that is a theory that has been presented, and maybe yes, indeed, this is quite possible. But what I was kind of coming up to a climax at the break, and I did get this idea.
Oh, okay, go back to that then.
Yeah, which is, to me, is far more interesting than talking to experiencers who are basically going to be going back to their job, or perhaps worse, they may not have a job, which is often the case. And it may be, not too attractive set of orange crates they might be sitting on. So for their couch, and it depends, not all of them, but in any case. So anyway, he presented this, he basically acknowledged the idea that I might be able to see his facility someday. And of course, that would be in India. He said, that's where you want to go, not to New Mexico, but to India. And of course, I started, wow. Now, of course, as I was talking about the secret chiefs contact you when they're ready for you, not the other way around. Well, this is an individual who is so busy, and who the hell know what is going on in his life. So in other words, he's going to be able to facilitate what I would like to do when he's ready to do it, when the time is right, when the timing is right. Now, I've also had occasion today, of all days, to review some of the correspondence that I've gotten with Radu Sinamar, who used to correspond with me quite a bit. And this is probably from the year 2011. And he says to me, and this is just a little paragraph from a rather long letter. He says, probably there will not be many letters written between us from now on, because there is a great chance that soon I will go to a certain place and we will not be able to keep in touch. And then he puts this in italics. He says, but I promise you, if time permits, I love this, if time permits, and this is basically saying time is the ruling factor, I will do everything possible to take you and show you what you want very much to see for yourself, as Caesar did for me many years ago. I do not know if this has value for you, but know that I will not forget this, and according to the possibilities, I will arrange for you what Caesar arranged for me 8 years ago. I just hope not to leave until you can read the fourth and last volume in the series. Now, of course, the fourth volume I have read, and I published it. It's called The Secret Parchment, and it's very important that I did read that, because that just ups the ante to everything. But he's telling, and I forgot all about this, of his conviction to show me these things, and because he's very much out of touch for the last, that was 2011, was 15. It's almost been 4 years since I've heard from him. And it was a couple years ago that when I met with the publisher, my publisher in Romania, which is also his publisher, the publisher was very concerned that I'd heard from Radu. And it's because he went to this place, wherever this place is, which we can only, I can only intuit or speculate that it has something to do with the inner earth. And
yes,
And that was the thought I had when you were starting to talk, yes.
So what are some of the things, our listeners are probably not aware of this, but what are some of the things that you might get to see?
That I might get to see, or he might get to see? Or what was your
Well, he's going to show you, right? He said he wants to show you.
What Caesar showed him quite specifically was the chamber beneath the Sphinx, which included the holographic record history of the planet, and it included the DNA banks where you could put your hand over the portion of the table and it would read out your DNA. The closer you get to the table, the more microscopic would be your DNA. And then if you put it over another spot on the table, it would read out the DNA of another life form show you the planet and star that it came from. If you put them over there simultaneously, it show you a hybridized version. So these are, and plus there were 3 tunnels there that went into different places, one to Egypt with a similar installation, one to Tibet, and one to the inner earth. Now, so what might I see? I might see time in a way that I've never seen it before. And this would be an accelerated pace of evolution for myself. Now, as an ordinary human being, and I grew up as a very ordinary human being, and I've always been able to identify with that, I've had the occasion to make literally quantum leaps in terms of my own evolution vis-a-vis what would have been expected of me had I gone along and done normal, so-called status quo normal things. I never followed the status quo, but if I'd been a status quo and become a doctor or a lawyer or some noble profession, and I wouldn't have been able to do all the things I've been able to do and make all the consequent evolution. So I would say that, at least in my own eyes, for what I would have been expected to be, I've done remarkable things. But so this would only indicate if what he's saying, I would be able to step it up a notch. That would be the hope. Now, it's I don't like to use this analogy, but it's a very apropos analogy. Like, say, when one takes, and I know you're familiar with this, when one takes a hallucinogenic, one can see all sorts of things that they haven't seen before. And they can view the world in a different way. Well, this would be like that experience without having to take the hallucinogenic. And also, what my key role is to integrate it, not only for myself, but for others. And this is why I don't always, go to the experiencers, because they're often being, it's not so productive for me in trying to accomplish what I am trying to accomplish, which is to integrate these experiences, which I know it does help experiencers, and that's the best way I can help experiencers is by doing this. It's possible.
It sounds like you're being offered an opportunity that it would not just benefit you, but will benefit all humanity. And I do hope you get to do this and let us know what happens.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your support in that direction. I also actually, by the way, can help experiencers with the techniques of Qigong, which I've been practicing for 8 years with Grandmaster Roosevelt Gainey in Brooklyn, New York. And, of course, this is astounding. The problem with Qigong in general is that when you tell people how to do something, how to improve some aspect of their anatomy or psychology, they will reject it, because it's like telling somebody to stop eating sugar. Sugar's not good for them, and you say, whoa, and then they go eat their candy bar. So this is one of the problems, because the person has to reach out and do it. And this is a big task for this. And these, like say, I'm doing this over an hour a day, and it completely changes your anatomy. It completely changes your psychology. And if I would be so bold as to say that I was ahead of the average citizen in terms of my general awareness after having all the experiences I've had and written all these books, well, I still had to change all of my viewpoints and how I would look at things, how I would think of things, focusing my attention on my frontal lobe and then back to the crown, the back of the brain, and doing this 50 times a day changes your mind. It also gets rid of any cobwebs that seniors might have, but one has to do it.
That's wonderful.
Fascinating.
All right, let's go. I detect each one.
Wonderful. Okay.
So where do you want to go with your story? Because it's fascinating. We're all ears.
This is the first time.
Well, there's all of those different paths. One is what would you see in the inner earth? What would you expect? Because I've been reading a lot of stuff about what that might be like, and what would happen if you went into the Egyptian path, and and so forth. What would you see down each of the three paths? What do you imagine?
Right, and then also you were also like David was in India, so you're about to see all this incredible stuff.
Wow.
Well, that's it's like it sounds great, and I want to share one other thing, and I've never shared this, I don't think, on the radio, but it was like I got another letter, and this is the last letter I ever got from Radu. I'm not going to read the whole thing. First, I have to find it, but it was actually I can't read the paragraph, but basically he was telling me that, okay, in the Transylvania Moonrise book, there is a letter, or there is a character called Eleanor. It's a male, and Eleanor is an alchemist, and he is following a tradition where he lives for literally hundreds of years. Now, in the book, he's about in his 60s, but he looks like he's 26. And this is sort of borne out by his driver's license sort of indicates this. But basically, I'm in Qigong, I'm learning to extend my life, to 120, maybe 200 years at the most, 120 to 150 conservatively, by basically feeding the internal organs with breath. And when the internal organs are filled with breath, when the lungs, there's 5 lobes of the lungs, and these feed the internal organs. And when when you die of old age, it's because you've got organ failure. Well, if you're feeding oxygen into the organs, you're not so likely to die. And this is something that, doctors don't know how to breathe. They don't have a clue other than what they breathe. People don't know how to breathe. So anyway, that's a whole nother subject. But then
I agree entirely. My studies lead me to the exact same conclusions.
But anyway, while I'm learning this technique, now I'm learning in Transylvania Moonrise this whole idea of alchemy, whereby you can extend your life to hundreds or even thousands of years. It says, but once somebody hits about 300 and something years, then they can kind of literally just learn how to dematerialize. Now, this might sound very far-fetched, but when you read Chapter 1 of Transylvania Moonrise, it's very coherent, and it's written as if someone who actually knows what they're talking about. Like, you can read a professor talking about the baseball and how to hit a baseball. And we must remember that physics professors used to say in the 60s that curveballs don't curve. Well, you could talk to, say, a great baseball player like Ted Williams, and you listen to him talk about hitting a baseball, he knows what he's talking about, because you can tell by the way he talks about it if you don't know if he did it. So when you're reading this, you're reading like, this guy knows what he's talking about. That's what he sounds like. And in any case, I'm reading this book before it's published. I'm having it translated, and I'm saying, oh my goodness. I said, I would have paid the money to get this whole book translated just to read this chapter, just to read it. It was that important to me. So anyway, now, Radu tells me in the last letter he ever wrote to me, he says, he tells me about how incredible this man is. And he says, you're going to meet him. And this is going to happen at a time when you least expect it. And it was going to happen. And it was supposed to happen in about a year from that time, within a year. And it never did happen because I was not ready for it. I was not ready for it. And I recently was discussing this with somebody today, and it's sort of like there's certain things I have to complete in my life that are of a very rudimentary nature, and it basically has to do with completing the renovation of my house, which got sidetracked when I got divorced 15 years ago. I mean, I was well on the way to doing the renovation, and it's just like have never recovered from it. And for some reason,
when you renovate your house, you renovate your mind. That's really cool.
Well, yes, and So anyway, this is I'm realizing the focus that I need to put on this, because then I will be complete and perhaps able to participate in this idea. Now, by the way, I took this information to my Qigong teacher, eventually gave him the book, and I said, but before he'd read the book, I said, look at this guy. If I were to meet this guy in person, I'd be watching his breath every set, every moment. Well, the man in the book, Eleanor, describes this device that he has, which is geometric in nature, and it's a rhomboid with a circle in it and a square and a crystal, and in the center is a violet crystal, which he turned violet through his will. Now, this basically creates a vibration that keeps you young. It's a vibration. And I asked my Qigong teacher about it, and he says, yes, vibration is a completely valid way of affecting something, but you have to have the vibration, and it has to be tailored to you. So in any case, my Qigong teacher, instead of saying, oh, no, you got to stay with my practice. No, he said, he's open to the truth. He says, well, vibration is vibration. So it's certainly an open possibility. But while this stuff sounds all fantastic and wonderful, most of my life is day to day dealing with mundanity. Always has been. Because I'm like a writer and a publisher, and I'm an administrator as well. So these things have to be done. That's how I survive. But, the percentage of, I guess what you'd say, excitability and excitement and what can happen, there's been a lot of self-improvement as well. So this is sort of the gateways are there, and to the degree that I can walk through them and share them with other people, it has not only value for myself, but value for other people. So these things, and you were asking me, well, where do we want to go from here? Well, that's, I couldn't tell you where I want to go, what's going to happen in the future. This is one other thing I'm going to mention. David Anderson said in 2016 he would do 2 public appearances with me. We don't know where they will be. We don't know when they will be. But he did say that. Now, since I've spoken to him in June, I've not heard from him, which leads me to believe that he's I asked him a funny question when we were like off the air. And I said, do you ever feel like Captain Kirk? Captain Kirk sitting in front of that screen, and he's looking at what's outer space. I said, only instead of looking into outer space, you're looking into time. Do you ever feel like Captain Kirk in that? And he just you could feel him smirk on the other end of the phone, and he says, well, there's just some things I can't talk about. So, it's sort of a yes. There was also another interesting thing. Now, in the new book, The White Bat, I have chapter 7 includes a patent of the time reactor. I'd originally put that patent on my website, but it was taken down, not by me. There have been other things on the website that have disappeared. So, which are very interesting, but we won't go into those now. So anyway, I put it in that book, which pleased him because now it's on record. He said it was sequestered by the U.S. Patent Office. He filed it. There was an official filing. And what sequestered means is that in order to look at it, you have to have a certain classification or security clearance to read it. So it's there, but you can't read it if you're just a common person.
Oh.
So basically what I did get out of him in this is I asked him, the time reactor works, it says in the patent, in a low-grade electromagnetic field that is then, it has these lasers with multiple sensors in it in a circular, or maybe it's an oval shape, but anyway, and then you emit a chemical reagent, which basically means a gas. And I did ask him about the gas. I said, is that gas a noble gas?
one of the noble elements, the noble gases like xenon, and what is it? The different elements. And he said, no comment. That tells me that it is. That tells me that he says no comment. That tells me that it is. It's a noble gas. Now, the noble gases were given a reason of being called noble gases because they obviously had exotic properties. And this goes back into the foundation of the periodic table of elements, which goes back into the days of alchemy. However, that was one thing I got. I also got out of him that there is when you have this time field, this closed time field, there's a boundary layer, which is very dangerous to penetrate or to put your hand through. And this is what happened in the Philadelphia experiment when people got scorched. He did reveal that he has a proprietary technology that enables you to go through that boundary layer. So you can walk.
Wow.
And I asked him if it was like anything like a skin diver's sweatsuit, and he says, no, it's not. So I don't know if it's a device you hold or if it's something that you wear or whatever it is. But he said he has the technology to where a human can penetrate that field, which is really quite astonishing. Now, maybe the most interesting thing that he did reveal, and he first revealed it privately, and I was surprised when he said it publicly on the podcast, is he said about Romania, because I asked him if he could tell me anything about Romania with the Radu stuff that he knew, and he says, well, what I can tell you about Romania is that there's a cave in Romania, in Transylvania, called Choclovina Cave, and it has this unusually high deposits of exotic minerals. And he says the only way those exotic minerals could have formed was by a high concentration of heat that would have been caused by a time reactor. And I said, okay, well, this is very interesting. And I said, would that, if there's a high concentration of what he calls space-time motive force, which is explained in the newsletter, would that facilitate time phenomena? He says, yes, it could. Now, there were two remarkable things about what he said about this cave called Choclovina Cave. And the first one was that he didn't know it, but I was there last summer. I was in the cave. And actually, I was sitting there doing Qigong in the cave. I was the first one to go into the mouth of the cave. There's 7 caves it connects with. And you have to have equipment to go deep into the cave. You can actually look at the cave on YouTube, people going into the cave. Choclovina is Cioclovina, I think is how you spell it, Choclovina. And in any case, I was getting this initiation done by me by one of my friends who was an incredibly gifted intuitive healer. And and I had my eyes closed, and she was doing this sort of feather ritual around me. And there's a very deep meaning with that between myself and her. But in any case, I'm in this cave, and I was taken there by an archaeologist who I had met the previous May. I'd been on the, vector of meeting him for years. And the people at the hotel had arranged for me, where I often stay there, had arranged for me to meet him. And he told me that he didn't know about the books that I'd published. And he speaks Romanian, and he prefers to speak in Romanian because his English isn't so good, but he can speak some. But in any case, he said that all of the things I was telling him about the books of Radu's lined up with many of the people he's talked to in this Valley of the Golden Thrones, is what it's called in Book 4 of the Secret Parchment. So I made friends with him in May last year. I went back in August, and he took me with his wife, and there were 2 cars of us and my friends. We went to this Choclovina cave, and he was explaining that it was the road to it was created by the dictator Ceausescu because it had the highest concentration of bat guano in the world, and the bat guano was used for explosives. So they mined it bat guano, but David Anderson's telling me it was a high concentration of space-time motive force. Now, all of this stuff is located not far from the golden tunnels discussed in The Secret Parchment, where there is reportedly huge golden thrones of pure gold with hieroglyphics nearby and on them, and nearby is a vortex to another world, which one...
Let me get it. Is this like a 50-mile area or a 20-mile area? What do you mean nearby?
When I say nearby, it took 50 minutes to get from the hotel to the locale, but the 50 minutes is because it's not an easy road and it's a curvaceous road. So, it's like you're in the mountains. So 50 minutes does not mean 50 miles. It means, and then, you can be, so I don't really know, tracking back on, all the switchbacks and whatnot, I really don't know where it would stand, except it's in the general vicinity of the...
Everything's connected underneath, I'll bet you.
Yeah, everything's connected underneath. And then there's these golden tunnels underneath. And these caves were, to really explore the caves and go into them, it really requires equipment. But the tradition there is you don't necessarily have to penetrate the caves. You go to the caves and you will be initiated or visited or whatnot. And so just the fact that we were there really got David's curiosity going. He was really like, you'll even hear his wonderment in the podcast, kind of like, that's really interesting that you were there. So I intend to go back next August, and I'm going to invite him. I'm going to present him with at least 4 venues, and he will pick the ones that he wants to do. And I don't know that he will pick that one. I would hope he would. I'd like to take him there because he has not been there physically. And he would love to go into Transylvania with me someday. But because I wouldn't say I know every little last nook and cranny of Transylvania because there's too many nooks and crannies. But I certainly have a familiarity with it that I didn't have. And I'm learning new things about it all the time.
Wow.
So go ahead.
Go ahead, continue.
Well, I was just going to say I basically have a lot of seeds going for me that create potential excitement in the future. And to tell you the truth, I might not be actually working on any of these I will go back next summer, but I'm not necessarily going to be working on these for the next even year, because I may be doing something else which might be even more important or interesting. Not necessarily during the time, but I'm not ready to announce that yet. It all depends. I have to follow what the path that is the most intelligent, at least from my own perception.
So who built all this stuff? What are your conclusions or theories?
Well, I have said this recently, and I think that when we talk about aliens and we talk about the discovery of who built this, I think the movie and the book, I read the book before I saw the movie, 2001: A Space Odyssey, is a very good metaphor where, they discover this monolith over centuries, and the ape man sees the monolith, and then they discover the monolith on the moon, and then they send this mission out to Jupiter. In the book, it's Saturn. And when he gets out there, he sees the monolith in outer space. And then he kind of goes into an interdimensional experience where he sees himself as an old man, and he begins to get downloaded with all this information. He has a transcendent experience, but basically all he really is discovering is himself, and that we built it all. We built it all. And we can say, and when we assign other authorship, these are lost parts of ourselves. And if you get down to the deep archetypal consciousness of everything, we are the cosmos, and we've lost that viewpoint. We don't think of ourselves as the cosmos. We think of ourselves as the individuated Janet, Peter, or Sasha that is in a human body that is struggling to figure out how we can survive in the cosmos and be at one with our fellow humans who have also forgotten that they are the cosmos, and or at least many of them have. So this is, it's like I don't believe in the Big Bang theory, but the Big Bang basically implies that we were all separated. We all went splat and we got lost. It's sort of, we need to become aware that we are part of the cosmos. So all of these,
I really like the way of formulating it. It's like A.R. Borden's topological thinking, where you can simultaneously be in more than one space, identifying with the creator of all and little Peter and Janet and Sasha, at both.
Exactly. And I was going to bring up something. It was a discussion I had with Janet many years ago, and it had to do with first of all, anyway, there was in the book 3, The Mystery of Egypt. It's talked about that part of what they're there to do is to recover discs. They're slabs, and if you do something to one of them, it'll read out a holographic projection of time. These were time archives that they were recording, and they could only take so many of them with them because they only had so much room in their vehicle. But they took a huge bunch of these back, and they were to be sent back to America for further evaluation. And this was in the book Mystery of Egypt, and I always thought, what are they going to do? They're going to send these back to America. Now, what are they going to do when they get to America? I mean, we're talking about the Pentagon. And what is the Pentagon going to do with them? And I'm thinking, well, they're going to have to invent some sort of CD player or slab player where they can watch these holograms. And then they're going to have to recruit people from the FBI and the CIA, maybe trainees and maybe some of the soldiers. And they're going to have all sorts of people watching them and taking notes on them to know what is relevant. And I'm thinking, like, what is this? This sounds so implausible to me. Then one day, a radio host that I know was telling me about this huge computer that they're building in Utah. And it would make, it goes way beyond terabytes. I don't forget the name, but I mean, this thing is huge. And this thing could suck up all the internet in no problem. But then I realized, I said, well, it would make sense that they would build a computer like that to host these time archives. And you're not going to have people from the CIA and FBI and Pentagon watching these things and taking notes. What's that going to do? It's like, it's not going to do anything. So basically, it's a very awkward way. So what they're going to do is put it all in this supercomputer, and then they can, program it and spit out what is of interest. Like it's almost like having all this data that they could then, these are time archives, having a history of the world that they didn't have before. But then I also realized whoever built this, and now we can assume if we choose that these people in Utah working at the government are not necessarily working in our best interest, but are working to maintain the control of the status quo. Now, it then occurred to me that whoever built this and allowed these archives to be taken might have put a Trojan horse in there to where they could actually affect society, possibly in a positive way, possibly in a controlling way, or certainly run control over the group that is now, gathering all these archives. So this was an interesting...
Let me just stop for right now. It somehow sounds like what they've built is like the device that you've reported from Romania, where you can get those kinds of histories and things. It sounds like they're creating with the computer the same thing.
Well, it's probably something they would like to do. And, you sort of,
It's just like a young boy might want to dress like his father. He might want to go to work like his father. He might want, when he's a little boy, he might want to do the same thing that his father does. And so, these people would say, well, if they're doing it, we can do it too. Imitation is the greatest form of flattery. So, we really don't know, but these are ideas of what our world is doing and thinking. And the reason I mentioned my discussion with you, Janet, is because I remember you telling me about some weird computer installation that you were sort of it was right there on Hawaii, and that you had some encounter with. And so you've got all of these banks of data, operations, secret operations going on, and there's no shortage of them. It's just that people are coming forward with them more and more. And all of this reminded me of your experience that you told me many years ago.
Okay. Wow.
It's the Haleakala laser, which is part of the HAARP. They generate a cone, again, bounce it off the ionosphere to cause weather that they would change for military.
I'm 100% sure what all they do in Haleakala, but there's a big supercomputer there. Right. So, okay, so back to what you were saying.
Well, yes, and I guess what I'd say, one of the things I think the direction I'm going to be going into is some of the, I guess what you call underpinnings, the magical underpinnings of what's holding some of these paradigms together, and which would be sort of like knocking loose the cobwebs or blowing the nose of some of these situations. Because one of the things I've noticed in my correspondence or in my interactions with David, it follows a thread of magic. And I had studied magic prior to getting involved in the Montauk-project. And magic, of course, was in the background of the Montauk-project, the Aleister Crowley associations and whatnot. And I had studied Crowley. Only reason I studied Crowley was because I had discovered that L. Ron Hubbard, who I had worked for and close with, was a great aficionado of Aleister Crowley. So I wanted to, study what Hubbard had studied or learned. And this kind of like broke open my entree into the Montauk-project. So I was able to study occultism and understand it in a way that I felt was very beneficial to my understanding of the research that I've done. It's a very booby-trap area as well, and I've seen many people suffer from their involvement even in studying it. So in any case, that there is a great, I guess, occult means that which we don't see. So there is... I can't separate time travel from some of these magical situations and associations, and that's what I wanted to say about that.
Well, it seems that it's all connected: the astral projection, the time travel, the tantra, the mechanisms, the inventions that people create. But I don't think we necessarily need some kind of device to time travel. I think time travel is built into the human mind.
I'm glad you mentioned the tantra, and I will say why I'm glad. Because see, time is all wired to the moon and the menses of the female. And when we talk about Gaia, we have a very discoordinated Gaia consciousness when it comes to female menstruation on this planet and recognizing it for what it is and what it has to value. When the female menstruates, she's basically detoxing the emotions of the morphogenetic grid with particular regard to her specific household and or area of environment. It's an emotional detox, and this is why women will go through sometimes horrendous emotional experiences, because they are receptors. They are empaths. And so if you had a high incidence of abuse or murder in a neighborhood, I think you would see the menstruations of the women being all that more traumatic or associated with negativity. So
that makes so much sense. They have so much more oxytocin, and they're able to feel the coherent field around them. That your analysis is so right on, in my opinion.
Well, yes, and we don't recognize this function. Like in the ancients, they would have the women go spend their moon time, and they're doing work. The women are Gaia. They are our nurturers, and they're not just nurturing us to be, to feed us better food. There's more food for the soul. So the woman role of woman has been completely lost. So when we say how this, and then time is, the menses occurs on a regular basis with the moon, and this is one thing that Donald Trump is not going to bring us if he becomes the president. He is said that he honors women or likes them, but he doesn't understand this. Maybe he can be made to understand it, but if he becomes president or whoever becomes president. But this is really not a presidential thing. We have women acting like men, trying to be like political men. And this is, it's almost funny. It's almost funny. It's not funny. But so this is when we get into the, you say the Tantra is connected. It's the, that is really, Kali chakra, Kala is time. Kala is a word for time. So
right.
Calendar. So this is all related. The feminine principle, the feminine energy, and my synchronicities in the occultism of Montauk led me to Marjorie Cameron, who was the subject of the Babylon working, which was designed to reincarnate the goddess and to bring the goddess back. This was the work of Jack Parsons. Now, Jack Parsons is frequently vilified for being a Satanist, a devil worshiper, a disciple of Aleister Crowley. He was also a renegade who was a scientist who believed in getting results. And he got results in chemistry. He wanted to get results magically. And he actually gave his life towards this end. Now, whether that was sane or not, he was looking at the bigger picture. And whether he succeeded or not will be determined in the future. But in any case, the point he made, he made a very good point, which is not well understood. And so did Marjorie Cameron, who taught me much of this, is that the point of it is to resurrect, it sounds good to resurrect the woman and all this, but no, we want to resurrect the function of the woman. I mean, we want women, the function, well, both, yes. But it's like, you can't put a woman on a pedestal without enabling her to do what she does. Let her be who and what she is. And society is not built this way. And it's unfortunate that they don't go hand in hand. We need a reorganization of this planet, a re-education, and this is a vast, vast thing. And how does this fit into the new technical world we live in with Google and Facebook? And we're moving into astrologically in the years ahead when Aquarius, Uranus? Pluto goes into Aquarius. And this is the age of super technology. So how does the goddess fit into all of this? I don't really know, except that the doors are more open than they used to be. And this is a good thing.
Can you refresh my memory about what Crowley did with the modern incarnation of Nana? I think it was in the temple, in the Sphinx, right, or the pyramid, inside or underneath.
I don't know.
Remember you wrote that in one of your books.
I don't know if he.
It was like opening his mind for Hitler or something like that.
No, he didn't do a Nana. He did a sex magic ritual
in the pyramid, the Great Pyramid at Giza, and then when he went to the Bullock Museum in Cairo, he saw the 666 stele, and it had the Mentu, and it was all this stuff, and his wife began to channel, and she began to channel to him and do all this stuff, and then he began to transmit the Book of the Law. That's kind of what happened with him. I don't know if he had a separate thing with Inanna. I really just don't remember that, nor do I remember writing about it. It's possible, but I don't recall that.
Too, because that was a long time since
David Rockefeller, Suprema, said it was with Nimma.
All right, so we hear all these stories, but anyway, there was something about creating the timelines, and then, there's a Philadelphia experiment that opened that, and every 20 years we have the biorhythms all aligned. So we don't know what happened in 2003. Was there something that happened with the timelines with this?
In 2003 was the discovery of the chamber. In August of 2003 was the discovery of the chamber in Romania. There was also a blackout in New York, a major blackout. That was 2003. 1983 was the Montauk-project. 43 was the Philadelphia experiment. 63 was ITT Brentwood. And Brentwood is in Long Island. And I just discovered a little bit more about that project. They sort of had a precursor to the HAARP. They had all these antennas out there. I just it's a precursor. I mean, it could be a precursor to HAARP. But it's something we haven't known too much about is what happened in 1963 at ITT Brentwood. Now, 2023 would be the next big day with that biorhythm, and that's only 8 years away. And
right.
I've had big synchronicities every year that I go to Romania. Now, I happen to go to Romania during that window of August 10th to 14th. It's not, I don't go for that reason. I go because the camp now meets at the first week of August, and then I plan a trip after that. So it always coincides with these biorhythms. And I think one of the most spectacular ones was a couple years ago when I arrived. I was writing this book called The White Bat, and as soon as I get there, it's August 11th, and I'm told that they just saw a white bat a few days earlier on August 7th. They saw a white bat in Mashandi's cave, which caused me to go back the following May in pursuit of that white bat. I was not able to go to the cave because the weather was not, it's too muddy during May. That's when I believe that the bat was supposed to appear. But I was shown a picture while I was there of a whole species of white bats that is not known to zoology. And it's quite possible that the white bats...
Peter, we're going to have you back again. My goodness, I went fast. Could you please tell everybody how to contact you and any information you want to share, because we're going to get the end of the show here in just about a minute.
Sure. Skybooks at yahoo.com is email. People can contact me, skybooks at yahoo.com. The websites are digitalmontauk.com, where you can listen to the podcast, you get the newsletter, and if you would like to buy the books, you can go to Amazon or go to skybooks.usa.com, skybooks.usa.com.